Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this year's RTS Student Masterclass on Documentary. I'm Alan Haling. I'm the chair. I'm going to be asking the questions, but also hopefully you're going to be asking the questions via the chat facility. I'm going to be looking from time to time at the chat and picking out great questions. If you're wondering who I am the founder and editorial director of an independent production company called Renegade Pictures, now part of Warner Brothers. Before that, I was head of documentaries at the BBC, and before that, I was a commissioning editor in documentaries at Channel 4. And I've worked with some of the great filmmakers, Errol Morris, Alex Gibney, Roger, Ross Williams, Michael Moore, who incidentally I worked with closely on Bowling for Columbine and The Awful Truth, and who I saw correctly predicted the extremely disappointing result or non-result of the election. And if I'm a little bit jaded and tired, it's because I sat up most of the night, probably like you. Anyway, one more little thanks. Diana Muir, the producer of this session, absolutely fantastic. Now, to our guest today. He is George Amponsah, who I've known as a terrific filmmaker, followed the growth of his career over 20 years. He's a multi-award winning and BAFTA-nominated filmmaker who is currently making a 90-minute documentary for BBC One called Black Power, which I'm going to ask him to talk about, but it's executed by Steve McQueen, the artist and Oscar winner, and which should be on your screens later this month or early the next. His most recent project to have aired was Enslaved, a 4-part series with Samuel L. Jackson, examining the slave trade, and you can catch that on the iPlayer now. George has got a very eclectic filmography. He's done not just big feature documentaries, he's also done a lot of television, Four in a Bed. He's done Scam City. He's worked with Ross Kemp on Extreme Worlds, with Danny Dyer, before Danny Dyer was the Danny Dyer we all know, on Deadliest Men. So he's got a very big range. We'll be showing 4 clips of George's work and discussing his career. He'll be doing most of the talking. Now, we want you to get as much as possible out of this during the session. So please, as I said before, use that chat box to below the video to chat, comment, or ask George questions. You can pop out the chat by clicking the 3 dots in the top right corner of the chat box. So, George, tell us a little bit about how you came to be a producer and director in TV, because I think that you began your career by going to art college. So how did it all click for you? Was it quick and easy?
No, it wasn't quick and easy by no means, Alan. I went to art college around about 1989, 1990, and I did a degree. I was actually at University of East London, which when I went there, it was actually originally called North East London Polytechnic. And 2 things I knew about North East London Polytechnic was, one, that Ian Jury had gone there, from Ian Jury and the Blockheads fame, and 2, that they had a lot of film equipment. And so I went along, I went along and to do the degree course, and spent 3 years doing what I considered to be experimental art films, or making experimental art films. And I was just shooting stuff on pretty much any camera I could get my hands on. And that included Super 8 cameras, 16mm cameras, video cameras, and the format at that time was VHS or SVHS. And I was shooting a lot of stuff on still photography, and I was putting all those elements together to make what I considered to be films that express what I wanted to say. So that was, 1990, and I did a degree course for 3 years. I then blagged my way onto an MA course at University of East London, which was simply an excuse to keep using the equipment. So the MA course I did was an MA by independent study. So the part-time course, which was dirt cheap. I mean, it must have been, because I could literally afford to pay for it myself. I didn't need a grant or anything. And it just meant that I was still able to make films. And so that lasted another 2 years. And by then, mid 90s, 95, 96, I was sort of trying to get a job. I didn't have a chance of getting any work really in the industry. I was nowhere near. But I managed to get, a sort of apprentice type position with a production company in West London called Espresso TV. And I was just basically a runner. Well, I wasn't even a runner. I would say I was a.
Oh, we seem to lost George for a second.
I did a lot of licking stamps and running back and forth to the television. It was called Espresso TV. They didn't actually make television. They made specialist interest documentaries about very niche topics, which would end up as VHSs, because that's how back in those days, or DVDs on the top shelves of W.H. Smith's. So for instance, they specialized in making films about the restoration of old World War II fighter planes, like the Spitfire or the Hurricane. Anyway, I had been nowhere near one of their productions, or nowhere near a shoot or a location or a set. And I was doing it as work experience, which I got through the job center. And I had to report back to the job center to tell them how my work experience was going. And I told them what I was doing, which was basically sort of licking stamps and running a fetching coffee. And I was kind of fine with that. But the lady who I was talking to kind of blew a gasket, and she got on the phone immediately to the producer at Espresso TV and said, you must give him some proper work experience. And then soon after that, I went on my first shoot, and it was actually quite exciting, because we, I was filming a Spitfire plane and taking off and landing, and so that was my first sort of experience in that sense. And then by the late 90s, I decided I wanted to try and apply to get into the National Film and Television School. And that's where I met you, because as we were talking about earlier, you came in at a stage to talk about the reality of a career in the television industry.
So I must have given you good advice.
Well, you certainly didn't dissuade, put me off in any way, shape, or form.
So you went to the National Film School. Was that formative and crucial?
Absolutely, yeah. I loved it. At the time that I was at the National Film and Television School, it was a 3-year course. It's now only 2 years. But what I remember about it was, first of all, how fast that 3 years went. I was in there constantly. It never felt like I was, doing work, or I was involved in study. And it was just, I was just in there late evenings. I was in there Saturdays and Sundays. I'm pretty sure there was one occasion, I think I went to pick up some equipment on Christmas Day once. It was open every day of the year.
And you were making films, yeah?
Yeah, I was making films. So I got onto the documentary directing course. And I should say that actually when I got into the National Film and Television School on the documentary course, that wasn't the first time I'd applied to get into the National Film and Television School. I'd applied a year earlier to get onto the cinematography course, because I'd done quite a lot of camera work, you know, from still photography to Super 8, doing a lot, shooting a lot of stuff on Super 8, shooting on 16mm. So I knew my way around cameras. And in my mind, I thought, I'm never going to get onto the directing course, but I'm sure I could get onto cinematography. And as a cinematographer, if I shoot enough stuff for directors, I can kind of, by proxy, learn what they're doing and become a director myself. And so
being a director was always your ambition, your real ambition.
Yeah, it was. And one of the things that I most admire about the National Film School is they spotted my strategy straight away. And someone said, and you know, I think I went for, I don't think, did I get an interview? I think I got an interview, but anyway, I got some feedback from the cinematography course saying you should apply to be a director because you're not a cinematographer, you want to be a director. So never darken our doorstep again in the cinematography department.
Just jump forward now. So you made your second year film, you made your graduation film. How did you then break into television? Because it's not an easy step to go from graduating from whatever kind of film or visual school that you've been to, you know, college, university, wherever, into television. A lot of people find that step difficult. How did you do it?
Okay. You see, the first job that I did for television post film school, I wouldn't consider that to be breaking into television, to be quite honest. And you were involved in that, Alan, at the development stage. So that was the BBC Storyville film, and it was a film called The Importance of Being Elegant. We'll show a clip in a minute.
Yeah, we'll come to that.
Right, and it was a 70-minute film which was shot over a period of about a year and a half, 2 years. And we shot it in London, we shot it in Paris and in Brussels. And it's a film about this cult of fashion.
Let's not talk about it, but it's the general principle of how you got into TV.
Oh, okay. You see, what I was going to say is, even after making that film and it being shown on the BBC, and doing really quite well, you know, getting a lot of good reviews, I still found myself in a position where I didn't actually have a job in television because, you know, what I found was when I was applying for jobs, inevitably people would say, well, have you done this kind of job before? Or at least something like it. And, you know, can we see your CV, which shows that you've done this job before or something like it? And, you know, preferably many times. And I didn't have that. And so I did face that real conundrum of, you know, trying to get experience, but everywhere I went, people wanted to see what experience I had. And it didn't seem to matter that I'd made this critically acclaimed film for BBC Storyville, or that I'd graduated from the National Film School. In fact, if I'm being honest, I rather got the impression that graduating from the National Film and Television School was quite off-putting for a lot of production companies.
Because I think at that time, and probably still today, people expect, you know, people to have become a runner, researcher, you know, assistant producer, AP. They expect one to have done, in effect, an apprenticeship, in effect, to have gone through the rungs of the television industry. And I know many people who went to the National Film School who struggled. Eventually, I think all of them did get into television. Obviously, there are famous people slightly before your time, like Nick Broomfield and Molly Dineen, who did and who kind of are now very, very famous and established. But it isn't an easy transition. And you were determined, you were going to be a director, you were going to jump, and you did have one big advantage, which is you could shoot. And at that time, not that many directors could shoot. Now it's almost automatic that directors are expected to shoot. Let's move to your first clip. In a way, we're going through your filmography backwards. So we're going to start with the most recent thing that, program that aired. And I mean, it finished airing only a couple of weeks ago. Enslaved. So tell us a little bit about that. You were working with somebody as a presenter, Samuel L. Jackson, very, very famous. Give us some background. What was the series about? What was your role in it? And take us into the clip.
Okay, so Enslaved was it's a 4-part series. It's currently on BBC iPlayer, and it's about the transatlantic slave trade, the history therein, and it's presented by Samuel L. Jackson. And I think I got a email from my agent towards the end of 2018 saying that this was a potential job on offer, and I was really excited, very, very excited. And I think, my main objective was to get through it, to direct these episodes, and at the end of it, be in a position where the great Samuel L. Jackson still had some regard for me and didn't feel that, look, why, what the hell, who's this guy? And, why have you given me a novice to work with? And, I'm very fortunate I can say that was achieved. Look, before we start the clip, I just want to show you something that I've got on my mantelpiece. Just bear with me one second.
While he's doing that, I'm just going to check the chat to see.
This was, I don't know if you can read that. So that takes pride of place on my mantelpiece. And it's a publicity photograph from Pulp Fiction. And it's signed by Sam. It was great working with him. And it was, prior to working with Samuel L. Jackson, the biggest sort of celebrities I'd worked with, as you mentioned before, were the likes of Dyer and Ross Kemp. And I mean, even with those people, you start to realize how quickly the wheels can come off the tracks if you could basically piss them off. And, you've got to keep them happy. But part of keeping them happy is making sure things go smoothly on set and you get the job done, and that they feel that they're doing a good job and they're doing good work. Happily with Sam, I think that was the case. Last year I was filming in Brazil, Ethiopia, Spain, Portugal, Jamaica, and where else? Well,
George, can you take us into the clip?
So I'm going to show you a clip that a clip which was filmed in London, and it's with Sam and Afua, and they're discussing a painting, which is a painting of Dido Elizabeth Bell, who's quite a significant figure. There's a feature film made about her, but yeah, I'll show you the clip, and then we can talk about it afterwards.
Good.
Oh, hey guys! Introducing Dido Elizabeth Bell. She's the daughter of Lord Mansfield's nephew, and he brought her to live in Lord Mansfield's house. She was raised with his daughter, supposedly as equals. Either way, the question is whether having her in that household colored Lord Mansfield's judicial action.
Well, I did not expect this. A picture like this, a painting like this, in those days, putting them on an equal footing.
We do know that when he died, he left her an equal share of his estate.
But at the same time, was she really equal? She's got the tropical fruit that was very common as an accessory for African servants in paintings belonging to the aristocracy. Really? She's got the turban. It says, I'm exotic.
She got the big South Sea pearls, though.
She has the pearls and she's dressed in fine clothes. Yeah. So in a way, I feel like this painting conveys the ambivalence of her status at the time.
I was angry at Lord Mansfield for ruling for the good guys, but on a technicality.
But now you think he's a good guy because he had a black girl living in his house?
It's not just a black girl, it's family. He's leaving money, and that puts me into his mind, and I'm thinking, whoa, maybe at that time, the only thing he could do was find on a technicality. This reveals his soul, and at the end of the day, the fact is that he just made a ruling that was the beginning of the end of the slave trade.
Most of the time, we don't hear the voices of the African people, of black people, of people who had a history of enslavement, because they haven't left written records. All we have to go by is paintings that were commissioned by their white benefactors or diaries left by white people who met them.
Right.
I would love to know what Dido's life was really like.
Great. I've got some good questions in the chat. I just asked you one question: the role of your director as a director in a major project like this. You know, how do you describe it, and how does it differ from some of the other projects that you've done in TV?
On a project like Enslaved, I think I was more aware of being a spoke in the wheel than I've been in probably any other projects I've worked on as a producer director. You're always a spoke in a wheel as a producer director. You know, when you work in television, or you know, because it's not necessarily an opportunity for you to express your, you know, artistic sort of, you know, creativity and sensibility. You're there to do a job. So that's how I would describe it, Alan. Very much a part of a machine.
So I've got a couple of questions here that have come through on the chat. One from Ross Wilder, who's been asking quite a lot of good questions, actually. He says, I really like watching and making expository documentaries. Is there a particular style of documentary you enjoy watching? And if so, how's that influenced your visual style?
Right, a particular type of documentary that I enjoy watching. I'm not sure that there is, to be honest, Russ. You know, it really depends, you know, because I agree with Michael Moore. You know, I kind of think, you know, with documentaries, I think that, you know, don't even necessarily even call it a documentary. Just, you know, call it a film. You know, it's a storytelling exercise, and whatever style is appropriate to telling that story, and, you know, from beginning to end, keeping people engaged from beginning right through to end in that story. I think you know, anything goes. So I think the style really depends on what the story is that you're trying to tell. And
I've got another one from Rachel. What key skills would you say are imperative for wannabe documentary directors as we work our way up the ladder?
Right, that's a very good question. Key skills. Funny enough, I think you have to be a good listener. I think you have to have a facility for multitasking, which is a bit strange hearing myself say that, because I don't particularly consider myself to be a good multitasker. But you know, when you're engaged in directing films, it does sometimes feel like a juggling act. It just feels like you've just got to have quite a few balls in the air, so to speak, at the same time. You've got to be a people person.
What about shooting and editing? What about shooting and editing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, I mean, even if you're not self-shooting, you know, even if you're not self-shooting, because nowadays my work tends to be, if I'm a lot of the work I've done recently, I haven't been self-shooting, and I kind of, as I get older, I prefer it that way. But working with a camera person, you kind of need to know what they're doing and what they, you know, and what you know, what makes them tick. So that really helps.
Were you working with a camera person on Enslaved?
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. You know, top.
So that isn't self-shot. Okay, well, let's move on to the second clip, which is from your BAFTA-nominated film, a major cinematic film that I think you initiated on your own without a television commission, called The Hard Stop.
Right.
A film that you made over 3 years, completed, I think, about 4 or 5 years ago. Opened at the Toronto Film Festival, shown at the London Film Festival. Can you give us, as we go into the clip, some background about what the film dealt with and who the character we're going to see in the clip was?
Okay, so the film dealt with the 2011 riots in the UK, which started in London, North London, Tottenham, following the death or the shooting and killing of a young man in Tottenham called Mark Duggan. And I got, a year later, I got access to film with 2 of his childhood friends who grew up with him in very much the same sort of life as, had lived very much the same sort of life as he did. And I started filming them, and that was self-shot, I should say, because I got access to film with these gentlemen, and I just resorted to what I'd learned at the National Film and Television School. And, you know, I started making a long-form observational documentary. And I told them that was my intention, because, again, it was quite a sensitive access story. And these guys were very, very distrustful of the media, of anyone who they thought represented the media. So it took a while to gain their trust in order to make this film. And that film was shot over a period of about 2 years. And the clip you'll see is one of the main protagonists. There's 2 people in the film. And again, I applied lessons I'd learned in the film school from teachers such as Molly Dineen, Nick Broomfield, Dick Fontaine, you know, and one of the things that I was taught in film school was, you know, if you've got 2 characters in a film, make sure that they're not doing the same thing. They're not sort of, you know, a carbon copy of each other. They've got to be, you know, 2 sides of the same coin at the very least. And I think I found the perfect 2 people for this film, who I felt represented all aspects of Mark Duggan. So I'll show you. We'll run the clip, and perhaps we can talk a little bit about the film afterwards.
3 trainers. Yeah, up to 3 pairs of trainers, 2 tracksuits, 1 pair of jeans, 1 pair of jeans. Yeah, most prisons allow 1 pair of jeans. No jackets with hoods. None of that. They've got to be like collared.
1 dressing gown in there on all.
Yeah, dressing gown to take in.
Flip-flops, 1 pair of flip-flops.
You want flip-flops anyway, because going in the showers, mate, you don't know what some of them scummy fuckers have got, mate. And if they've been jacking up in their legs, the legs pustulate, and it gets on the floor. You get a cut or something. You end up with Hep C, Hep B, all sorts. See, when you go in. See also when you go in.
The road life is a mentality. A man that says that he's not going to work a 9 to 5 and he's going to make money by other means. All this time, I've been living this road life, so to speak. I've just been wasting my life, really, you know, like that. I've been loyal to something that don't have no love back for me. Mark's death opened my eyes like, that shit got real. It's not a game no more. See you later in a bit.
Be lucky, son.
Good luck, brother, yeah?
See you later on.
Oh, that's powerful, and the whole film is really powerful in my view, and was deservedly nominated. I do think it's a pity it's never been on the BBC or on Channel 4. I think that's an indictment of both institutions because it's a film that should have been. But anyway, tell us about the two principal characters and your purpose in, you know, in the documentary, what you were trying to achieve.
Thanks, Alan. That's you know, when with all the headlines following the UK riots in 2011, especially the headlines about Mark Duggan, I felt there was something missing, which was actually who was this person, you know, in terms of who was a human being, and why did his death cause that reaction from the community that he came from. And I felt there was something that it was just something for me, and answers that I wasn't getting to those basic questions from all the media reporting, you know, about the riots and about Mark Duggan. And so a year later, when I was at a dinner party somewhere in North London, and I happened to start talking with someone who came from the Tottenham /Ford Broadwater Farm community. And I told her that I was a filmmaker. And she just said, well, would you be interested in making a film about two of Mark Duggan's childhood friends? One of whom is awaiting sentencing for his part in the riots.
That was Marcus, yeah?
Yeah, that was Marcus. And so I jumped at the opportunity and I met them. And you know, the first when I met them, it was particularly Marcus, who you've just seen in that clip, on his way to prison, basically. I thought there was something very, very engaging and intriguing about him, because I'd spent the last 10 years making all these television programs about these kind of tough guys, if you like, you know, the Danny Dyer's Deadliest Men and the Ross Kemp's toughest cops or prisoners and Vinnie Jones, whatever. And, you know, so I'd met quite a lot of these sort of characters. And I just felt when I met Marcus, you know, he just, and Curtis, they just weren't what I was expecting. and you know, they had all of some of the hallmarks that I've become used to seeing from doing those television programs, you know, and the tattoos and the gold teeth and etc. But I realized there was something more, and there was a willingness to show their vulnerability, and there was their reasons, their documentary, I guess their documentary purpose was very different to the kind of characters I'd met on Danny Dyer's Deadliest Men. It wasn't about self-aggrandizement or ego. You know, there was a genuine feeling of loss, and there was a genuine feeling of people who wanted to do something to right a wrong, or to, if not right a wrong, to correct a misunderstanding. And they just wanted to put the record straight about their friend Mark Duggan and who he was. And what I started to perceive, and you know, this could be a very subjective thing, but between the two of them, that's Marcus and Curtis, the two protagonists of The Hard Stop, I felt they kind of represented all sides of Mark Duggan in a funny sort of way, because one of them was quite a little bit, you know, you kind of felt yourself, you wanted to keep him a bit at arm's length, and you weren't quite sure. He's quite brooding and dark, and in some ways a little bit scary, but quite thoughtful and perceptive. And that's Marcus, who in the film, he's got the voiceover, and with him, before the film started, his explosions already happened. You know, so everything he talks about is in retrospect, and he's the one who takes us on a journey back to Broadwater Farm in the 1980s, when the first riot happened, which famously resulted in the death of PC Blakelock. So there was him, and then there was Curtis, who's his friend, who in the film is kind of much more of a kind of live wire, and actually quite an entertaining character, and in many ways really quite likable. He's a bit of a charmer, and he's a person who's very gregarious. And also he's a person who has got this tremendous work ethic, and throughout the film, I won't do any spoilers, but he's constantly looking for work, and he'll do anything to get work. And that's the other thing. I mean, you know, because I come from a very different background from those guys. So for me, some of it was a real eye-opener and a learning curve. And one of the things I learned was, I guess, you know, drug dealing is possibly like a lot of things people do for money and careers and professions, where the harder you work at it, you know, the more money you get. And apparently Mark Duggan, whatever he was doing, was the epitome of that, of a really, really hard worker. He was constantly on the go. So look, to make a long story short, yeah, what I was going to say, Ellen, is, you know, quite simply, I just felt if you want to, you know, you can tell something about someone from the company they keep. And by filming these two men over a period of time, I felt I could learn something about who Mark Duggan was.
Like you said, you came from a very different background from them. And I've got a question here from Sophia Rashid. She says, amazing access. How did you gain the trust of these two characters? Because it couldn't have been easy.
That's a very good question. It wasn't easy. And again, you know, one of the first things they asked me was, what are your intentions? How long is this going to take? And I said, look, I'm not going to be here to get a quick news story about you, film it in a day or two, and you know, you'll see something on Channel 4 next week, which lasts about 5 minutes, and then you'll never hear from me again. I want to make a long-form observational film. I said that, a long-form. I explained what that was, and which is going to involve me filming you, possibly for a year or more. And I want to film you at home. You know, I want to film you coming out of the bathroom or making a sandwich in the kitchen. You know, really intimate. And they said, okay. And I think you know, it was a period of time that was needed for them to realize that, okay, he's still here filming 3 months later, 6 months later, a year later. You know, there's one of the scenes which is shot with Curtis and his family on Christmas Day. But I can say in the first few months of filming with them, they were, every time I shot something, they wanted me to play it back to them afterwards. because they genuinely seem to think that I might be the feds, as they put it, you know, who's basically on a spying mission.
I've got a question, which was, how on earth how did you fund this film, you and your producer, Dion Walker? How, without television? You know, I think one of the themes that's come through this discussion of your career is persistence, that you are extremely persistent. And I would say to those people who are asking on chat, what kind of skills do you need? Well, you need a kind of rhino hide and you need extreme persistence. But how did you fund? I mean, a feature documentary is an expensive piece of work.
I think the official budget by the end of it was just under £200,000. But to begin with, in the first year of filming, what it was it involved filming people in London, in North London. It involved me filming those people in London using my Sony Z1 camera, which was gathering dust on my shelf, simply because I wasn't using it, and also because it was somewhat outdated when I started filming the hard stop in 2012, because that was a Sony Z1 that still took mini DV tape, and things had converted by then to digital. No one was shooting analog at that point. It felt like, to me, except me. And I spent the first year of the hard stop filming on a mini DV tape on my Sony Z1, but it didn't cost me anything. And it didn't cost much to put petrol in my car and drive to East London, where Marcus was in a halfway house, awaiting sentencing, or to go to Tottenham. So for the first year, it was self-financed by myself and by my producing partner, Dion Walker. And I should say that a lot of the funding came from the other jobs that I've been telling you about, as in the Danny Dyer's Deadliest Men and the Scam Cities and these sort of things. And I by then I tried to kind of make a transition, I suppose, in my career from being a producer director and going off to all these locations and far-flung places. And I started trying to do as much work as I could as an edit producer, which meant I was just required to be in an edit suite. So, and obviously I was getting paid, and I enjoyed a lot of the edit producing jobs I did. I was doing things like Body Bazaar. I've edit produced probably about 5 or 6. I think every single series of Body Bazaar that is on Discovery Channel. It's a medical science program in some senses, which looks at cases of extreme illness around the world. I've loved edit producing Body Bazaar, but apart from anything else, edit producing Body Bazaar enabled me to make the hard stuff, quite simply. Because a lot of the time I'd go from finishing an editing job on Body Bazaar at 6 p.m. and go straight home, pick up my Z1 camera and go to Leytonstone or Tottenham to film these guys.
Could you take us into your next clip, from The Importance of Being Elegant, a very different kind of film with a lot of music. So tell us about that and take us into the clip.
Okay, yeah. The Importance of Being Elegant was the first film that I made out of film school. So graduating from the National Film School, you were the development executive on it. In fact, the film wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for you, Alan, as I recall. I think you were at Mentorn at the time as an exec producer. But we got the film off the ground via BBC Storyville and Nick Fraser. And the film was about this Congolese cult of fashion and these people from the Democratic Republic of Congo who are just the ultimate fashionistas. And despite coming from backgrounds of extreme poverty, whether that's in the Congo, Kinshasa, or whether that's in the slums of Paris or Brussels, these people will not be seen in public unless they're wearing tens of thousands of pounds or euros or dollars worth of couture clothing. And we're talking about haute couture, Versace, Cavalli, Issey Miyake, etc., etc. And the question is, one, it's an amazing spectacle, and two, how the hell do they afford to wear these clothes? And their figurehead was a very, very famous, popular Congolese musician who's now deceased, called Papa Wemba, who, as far as I'm concerned, is responsible for some of the most beautiful music that's ever emerged from the continent of Africa. So with that being said, Papa Wemba being the ultimate sapper and the sort of like the godfather, and also an incredible musician. So he's the person who features in this clip that we're about to show.
C'est quelque chose, ça. Ça, c'est quelque chose. Regardez comme c'est beau, là. Allez. Ça, c'est ce qu'on appelle matos. T'as vu comment il est noble? Plus de 15 kilos quand même, hein? Dolce Gabbana. Aïe, 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 aïe. Oh. Oh là 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 là. C'est très impérial comme ça, c'est très... Hein? Quand on est dedans, on se sent vraiment comme un roi, comme un chef, quoi. Donc vraiment, t'es bien là-dedans. T'es bien là-dedans.
Trois, deux, un. Ouais, archevêque le bobo. Donc, vous avez aussi un reportage sur la SAP. Il y a plein de sapeurs dans la communauté de Bisso. Dans la histoire, nous avons démontré que les gens ont un véritable sapeur que bango tout. Mais toi qui m'as nouvelle mon côté royaume, le roi Abimi. Roi Abimi, c'est un mingi da plaisir à missionner sur les Congolais et en Afrique mobimba. Mais bobo sanate. Papa est roi de la SAP, on a chef spirituel de la religion Gitendi. On a bilamba en Afrique. Tu vois la première na papa maté pour papa va bien que ngaza liboso na ye. Yanga era kaninyo basalio. Oyo bosana bo moto na yo nyoso e. Pe otikanga. Samoe na koloba nini na baninga. Kinshasa, tout le monde connaît que l'archevêque Bembo, c'est un grand sapeur. Quand je passe dans la rue, tout le monde sait, ah, celui-là, c'est l'archevêque de la SAP. La SAP, c'est ma passion, la SAP, c'est ma vie. Je suis toujours dans les magasins. Dans une semaine, je vais aller 4 ou 5 fois dans les boutiques pour regarder. Et quand est-ce que papa est passé ici?
La dernière fois qu'il est venu, il y a 3 semaines.
Il a pris quoi?
Il a pris le jean rebrodé, ouais.
Great, George. So, how did you choose this subject? I mean, it's going to be your first big documentary. How did you choose it? What really interested you?
All right. Well, you know, what I should have mentioned before that showing the clip is that these are people who've elevated their love of fashion, a passion for fashion, to the status of a religion. So if you're called a sapeur, or you call yourself sapeur, it's literally something that you adhere to, like a devout Catholic. And that's what I read when I first discovered that this thing existed, these people existed, and this cult existed. I think I was waiting, I think, to go and see the dentist, and I picked up a fashion magazine, I can't remember what it was, if it was Elle or Vogue or Marie Claire or something of that sort. And it had an article about these people, the sapeurs. Some of you might be aware of a Guinness advert, which has been on TV quite a lot, you know, and it just shows people, a bunch of people in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and they're like mechanics. I think that someone's a car mechanic or something like that. And there's basically during the day, they're doing these menial jobs and they're dirty, and then they finish work and they go home, they get showered, and suddenly they come out, they emerge in these costumes and these outfits, and they're the sapeurs. Anyway, it's advertising Guinness. But I discovered this cult reading about it in a magazine. I just remember thinking, this is amazing. Why have I not heard of this? And I would love to see this on television. And I just realized, well, okay, if in order for me to see on television, well, let's see if I can put it on TV myself.
You weren't a sapeur yourself?
That's actually quite a relevant question. And honestly, this is, in terms of access, right? What I clearly remember is myself and my colleague on the film, my co-director, Cosmo Splendor, who's a very, very eminent film director. He's made some brilliant films, like Paleo, for instance. She's made a film about her aunt, I think, called Marrying Gorky or something, which is currently on Netflix. Anyway, so myself and Cosmo co-directed the film, as you know, and you know, we were trying to get access to these people, the sapeurs, and one of our Congolese fixers or liaison people, whatever you want to call it, he eventually said, "Look, there's a problem with you two." And we said, "Well, what's the problem?" He said, "It's the way you're dressed." You know, because we were hanging out in these areas where you find Congolese people, like in North London, for instance, around Seven Sisters, and but we couldn't get anyone to really talk to us and engage. And our fixer said, our Congolese fixer said, "It's the way you dress. You're gonna have to up your game a little bit, and just go out and try not to, as I do. I can't speak for Cosmo. Try not to shop in Primark. See if you can go a little bit from Primark to Prada." Anyway, so we started. So we did. You know, we started to dress a little bit like the sapeurs, and we started to wear a bit of haute couture. And lo and behold, they started speaking with us. We started to get some access.
Let's move to your final clip, Dope, which is a series that you made episodes of for Netflix. So this is a, you know, very different, and it's a big American SVOD, very different style. Talk us into it. It's a very different, you know, a very different kind of access and a very different style of filmmaking. But I think it shows the range and versatility that you have, and also, you know, that you're able to do feature documentaries and what are clearly television series. So, you know, we haven't really seen one of these from you. So talk us into this and the challenges it posed.
Well, yeah, it was a series called Dope, and it was for Netflix, and the production company was Wall to Wall, and the exec producer is someone who I had a very high regard for, Chris Lent, and Wall to Wall had made a lot of Drugs Inc., a long-running series, and during my, you know, career working on films like such as the Danny Dyer's Deadliest Men and working on programs with Ross Kemp, etc., I'd always looked at Wall to Wall and thought, that's where I want to go, because in terms of this sort of genre of television, they're right up there, in my opinion. And sure enough, they got commissioned by Netflix to do, I guess, a version of Drugs Inc., but much higher production values. And I think Netflix wanted it, you know, things to be a bit more cinematic. And I guess because I'd made The Hard Stop, and that I'd made that as a cinema proposition, and it gone on and it got nominated for a BAFTA, I guess Chris Lent got me in for an interview to do one of these episodes of Dope. And the reason why I mentioned Chris and I've got I remember this interview that I had with Chris, which was just basically about 45 minutes of Chris just saying, ranting and raving about the hard stuff. And then afterwards, I got the job, and which involved filming in Detroit with, on the one hand, your drug dealers, and on the other hand, your police, whose job it is to catch the drug dealers. And it's very much the same format as Drugs Inc., but without the, just sexed up and made to look a lot more sort of, highbrow and the high production values. But, I loved it. And that was self-shooting. So I was shooting on an FS7. And the job was to go out there and get access.
Let's move into the clip.
Yeah,
Sorry to
okay.
interrupt. We've only got 5 minutes left, so let's move into the clip.
All right, well, yeah, let's run the clip.
You take Pure Mile, you get the greatest feeling of bliss. I just gotta give me some of that white people money. They gonna pay triple what we pay in the hood.
My Molly, I will get from the dark web. I make a comfortable like 60,000 a year.
MDMA is often cut with something. It's a business, you know what I'm saying? You don't worry about somebody dying.
The most I've ever personally been involved with, I've gotten 34 kilos of ecstasy out of a vehicle.
You're playing Russian roulette with MDMA. It's real dangerous.
I grew up on the east side. Selling pills helped me pay my bills, feed me, you feel me? But fucking with drugs is dangerous. I mean, you can go to jail, you can get killed, you can get robbed. But I'm not intimidated.
Come over here, let yourself go. Don't be afraid, it's not a problem.
MRX's turf is a notoriously violent stretch of the east side, off 8 Mile Road, known to police simply as the 9th Precinct. He's just picked up 50 E-pills to sell on the street tonight.
Do you think it's fair? You know how I care. Why can't you stay at least a night, mate?
These the E-pills right here, man. The main ingredient is MDMA. Shit, and with these bitches, you gonna be woke all night, always rolling, you feel me? All night, rocking and rolling.
That's terrific, and it shows the quality of access that you're able to get in very difficult situations. Now, George, we've completely run out of time. There are loads and loads of questions on chat. I have many people want to know about your work with Steve McQueen. Unfortunately, the session's a bit too short, but I've got one question from Christina, which is, what is your favorite documentary of all time and why?
Okay, I'm going to be really, really honest with Christina. That's a great question, but I honestly don't have one. I'm just, when it comes to films, I watch films repeatedly, and I feel films like painting. You could just, you could look at them every day or different day, and depending on your mood, it does different things for you. But you know, my favorite documentary of all time is probably my own. I'm not, it's probably The Hard Stop, just because I'm actually so attached to it. You know, it's like part of my own body. You know, there's so many films. There's a series on Stephen Lawrence, the Murder That Changed the Nation, which was made by Rogan Productions and by someone called James Rogan. And I will mention that because I'm now working with James Rogan as one of the exec producers on the BBC documentary that I'm making at the moment about the British Black Power movement in the 1960s and 70s. So I want to give a mention to that film as one of my favorites.
Okay. Well, that's very, very intriguing and very proper. And I just want to thank you on behalf of everybody who's been watching for your insights, for your tips on careers, and for showing us these terrific 4 clips. I know the session could go on, but it can't go any longer because there's another session following straight afterwards. So on behalf of everybody who's watching, thank you so much, George. Brilliant.
Thank you.